These projects, they go from sketch to finished building in, it's years. So the immediate feedback from your sort of creative act is missing. So I have to look for that in other ways. I've been working on my course very hard, so most of the videos I've been making lately have gone into the course. If you're interested in signing up or learning more about it, I'll put a link up in the cards and also down in the description down below, so you can check that out there. This is my favorite sketchbook, and of course, they stopped making it. And they stopped making it probably 3 or 4 weeks after I made the video where I said, hey, look at my favorite sketchbook, go get one. So I've been getting a lot of requests for, hey, where do I get one of those? I kind of got tired of waiting around for them to start making it again, and I made a better one. So the latest round of prototypes are here. We're getting ready to place the order with the factory, and I thought I'd check in with you and see if you wanted one too. Sketchbooks are very personal objects. They have to be neutral enough that you can customize them and kind of make them your own. But as a product, there's a real conflict, because if they lack all identity, they might as well just be a stack of paper. I've always loved maps and their markings, the line types, points, the symbols. The benchmark symbol is just it's a reference point, and that's kind of how I see sketchbooks. They archive very specific ideas, very specific time points. The early prototypes were all printed, but that to me felt just too generic. So I started running some tests with my letterpress machine, and I love the subtlety of this debossed benchmark icon on the cover. You can see it in the right light, but it's definitely a secondary read. It's not in your face. It's not aggressive. Cover stock is this really smooth classic chipboard, which is the exact material we use in the studio to build study models. So it's thick enough that it doesn't bend easily, which means it's good in a book bag, and it also will fit on your shelf of your library, so you can archive it that way. The other thing that's nice is the cover stock can be stamped if you choose, so there's enough give in that material that you can really pillow a stamp into it. I like that there's a way to imprint the owner's identity here, kind of their own cataloging system. Paper's 70 pounds, it's 100-gram stock, has a very light dot grid to serve as guides while you're sketching. The spiral binding just allows you to lay it completely flat, and you can also double it back on itself, so it just makes it easier to use, I find. I think designing products it's really interesting. It's another dimension to the creative life, but it actually deals with a lot of the same issues that you deal with in trying to build architecture. You have a budget, you have clients, you have materials, you have details to work out, schedules, all those things that you confront when you're designing architecture. It's another way to express your design values. So I'm excited to get it out there. I'm excited to get it in people's hands. So I'm working on a site analysis for the OUTPOST project, and I'm using Keynote just because I find it's faster than Photoshop or Illustrator. I have a template set up with all my graphic assets, and all I do is come into the master slides and then copy the relevant graphic assets into the site analysis. A site analysis, just a visual representation of all the relevant site forces on a given site. And for this rural site, we're studying things like the prevailing wind direction. So we know we have winter storms that are coming out of the northeast, and onshore winds in the summer, which is predominantly when this house is going to be used. We have things like the sun. The solar chart is from andrewmarsh.com. Has this excellent sun path where you input your latitude and longitude and choose the useful dates. Summer solstice, you can see, is here. We've got the equinoxes plotted here and the winter solstice here. So you can see the azimuth and the altitude for each one of these dates. All I've done is taken a screenshot of this and then turned it into a PNG. And I've just taken that here in Keynote, and I've just changed the opacity of it. So instead of 100% down to 70, just so it's a little more subtle. We have development restrictions, things like the setback at the water. We have property line setbacks. There are certain givens like the road access. The road is about 1,000 feet
to this particular project. So we know the end point because we plotted out the ideal build site for the house, and we know the starting point, which is the access point off the road here, this neighboring residence. And then there are some wetlands throughout here. So this is a given. There are other givens like utility access. So utilities would all be at the road over here. This is remote enough that this is probably going to be off the grid, so it's less important here. On these waterfront sites, oftentimes the build sites are pushed right up against the setback, which means we can't put the septic in front of the house and gravity feed to it. We need to put it uphill and pump to it. The other thing about this site is, the soils are very poor, so there are limited places where we can put an engineered septic system. We have things like the view, so we want to know where the island views are and open ocean views. That'll help us chart where we want to place the house. So when we overlay all of these site forces together and map them on this plan, they begin to shape the architecture, and they start to suggest ways that we can integrate our design to this specific place. Once we've done the basic site analysis, all I've done is created a new sheet and copied in the more influential site forces. The winds, the topography is here, the views, and the sun. So knowing those things, what I'm going to do is start using that information to develop a building layout, a generic building layout. And you can see here, I have generic shapes here. These are just brackets, plus signs, forward slashes, a dot, and then these little boxes, which they just have a line around them and various opacity fills in them. And these, we're just going to use these to start deploying on the site and think about where we want to start orienting the program. So we'll copy and paste those in here. So as we start thinking about the site, I want to start thinking about gradations of public and private. So arriving to the site, we know we're arriving here. So this seems to be the more public aspect of the site. The more private aspect is obviously closer to the water. Now, it could also be that it's shaped more like this, where you're arriving here. We know our septic is here. We know our driveway is going to be here. And then maybe this edge is more private. So what I'm going to show you is just how I start to think about the diagram, the site diagram. And that's all this is. This is not to scale. You can see this bar is way bigger than what a traditional house would be. This is just to help think about how these site forces might influence the shape of the building and where we start placing the spaces. We want to start thinking about how we're going to shield against these winter storms and these northerly winds. This seems like a great place to put a more solid, more sort of heavy shell of the building here. So let's just think about this as being this northerly wedge that protects us. Once we do that, we start creating in its lee, we start creating some nice sheltered spaces here. And we know that our solar aspect is running like this. So in the lee here, this presents the opportunity to grab a lot of natural daylight and a lot of natural warmth. So let's just position some of these pieces here diagrammatically. Okay. I'm just going to set those like that. So I started thinking about, okay, this is the public arrival. Maybe this is where we have our barn. Maybe we have our guest quarters here. So you arrive here and then you really move from most public to most private. Most private space would probably be the bedroom, right? And this is actually a nice opportunity here. If I think about what types of spaces really want to be sheltered, want to feel sheltered, they want to feel more solid, maybe more cozy. So if I think about that combination of feeling the most private and the most sheltered, that says master bedroom to me. And what's nice about this is if we locate the master bedroom, let's just say here, for example, this grabs all these great views out to the open ocean, filtered views to the island, and it also provides the opportunity for eastern light. So sunrise is happening over here. So in the morning, that's great in a bedroom space. Now it starts to make me think, okay, we have this east-west grain to the site, but we also have this north-south grain to the site because we want to take advantage of these views, right? So let's just lay out this piece here, this bar piece. So we've got our east-west, our north-south grain here, and let's just add this one in here as I start to think about what spaces might want to orient really toward this lee. If I think about what this bedroom space here is doing, it's creating this lee, this sheltered space here. So that could actually be a nice public space. So you're arriving to this sheltered lee here. If we thought about this bar that's moving in the north-south direction here, if we thought about this as being the most public space, let's say kitchen, because that's close to the arrival, dining, and then living here. That allows these real public spaces to grab light all throughout the day. If we orient this bar in this direction, and let's just say we kept it one room wide, that means it's grabbing morning sun, it's grabbing afternoon sun, and late day sun. So these are actually gives you a really nice variety of spaces. The other advantage of orienting the living spaces like this is if the living space were here, right, we capture views out this direction to the water, views back to the forest, views in this direction. So you're grabbing a whole variety of things. The dining space, if this were here, let's just think for a moment that maybe this is a deck, this space. The dining could then orient to this deck, public gathering, afternoon, drinks on the deck here, looking out to the water. Equally, if it's too cold, you can come to maybe an outdoor terrace on the west facing side, and that's also sheltered from these winds, the onshore winds. So I'm starting to like how these building spaces are sort of suggesting themselves based on the site forces that are already in place. So I think of arrival here, into a sort of mudroom space, and then filtering down through the kitchen, dining, and living. So you get a unique aspect from the living space. You get this real private aspect from the bedroom space here. And then, you can start looking at other orientations that might work here too. So if I look at this, it's possible that we could think about, okay, well, maybe the living space orients like this out to the view here. Maybe the more solid pieces down here. Or the bedroom space is really oriented back here. And maybe you arrive to the public spaces, but the private spaces are held back from here. Maybe the bedrooms orient like this. There are so many opportunities here once you get these diagrams working for you to think about how each space may be deployed on the site and what advantages or disadvantages each of those orientations confers. So the next step here would be to hop out of the digital environment into the sketchbook and probably start building some models and really start looking at the scale of these spaces and how they might orient to each other and different site features. Okay. This is the first sun we've had in, feels like a month. So this is a typical hike for me. It's about an hour hike, half hour up, half hour back. And this usually divides the making in the morning from the managing in the afternoon. So I try and get this in, sometime between 12 and 2, roughly, depending on whatever the managing tasks are in the afternoon. But this is a great spot to be and a great break in the midday. I really do consider this to be part of my creative process. So I'm always listening to podcasts, always getting new ideas. And so this is definitely a part of it. It's nice to get out of the studio, get some fresh air, get healthy. All right, let's get back. So what are you thinking for timing?
I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, perfect. All right.
All right, man, thank you.
Thanks, Lucer. All right, bye-bye. Before we can begin schematic design, we need to choose a contractor, and we work with them to develop pricing along the way. And this way, we know what the price of the house is as we go along through every step of the design phase. There's no surprises. So that's kind of the early phase that we're in now. Interviewing contractors, the client will choose one of them to work with, and then we'll proceed into the schematic design phase. The biggest thing I'm looking for in an interview like this is to see how we communicate. Much of the building process is about communication. This is a big investment for you, for your client. It's an investment of not only dollars, but also time. These projects take a long time to build. So a year in design, probably a year or more in construction. This is 2 years of my life and their life and my client's life and a lot of resources. It's all tied up in this. So it's a really important relationship and one that we need to protect and get right. Now we're involving the contractor at this early phase because in pre-design, we're setting the size of the building and we're doing that based on a square foot cost. We know their budget, we know the size house they're looking for, but we don't know what it costs per square foot to build. So what do you think square foot prices are right now?
Generally, it's twice as much on the island as it is on the mainland to build a house.
So what do you think square foot wise I should be planning for?
Somewhere between $400 and $800, depending on depending on what kind of details that you're working on. And I would say 400 is really that's the bare bone.
Yeah. So if I assumed 600 a square foot, that's
probably doable.
That's a median range that we could use to plan. Talk a little bit about how you typically work. Are you typically bidding projects?
Right now I'm doing pretty much just time and material. In the past, like North Carolina, we're working down there, everything's fixed cost. Everything. You bid it, You win, you do it in a quick amount of time, you make money. You generally make less money if you're working by the hour.
Yeah.
So I didn't really want to, but it was the safest thing for my business on the island.
Okay. So typically when you're writing this time and materials contract, say we get through this estimating process, and basically at the end of every design phase, I want like an estimate that says this is how much I think the house costs. That way we all know we're on the same page.
Well, I would do a proposed budget.
Okay.
A budget for everything, so everybody is right up front on exactly what everything's going to cost, unless something changes.
Okay.
Or if there's an overage, but then that would be discussed, or under. You know. Yeah. That's the great thing about that. You can come under sometimes. You know.
That's good news. I never hear that. What I'm looking for is like, what are the things that are going to impact the architecture, the design that makes sense for out there?
Well, first of all, there's no dirt on the island.
Yep.
You know, you're hardly ever more than a foot away from ledge.
Yep.
Yeah, on the island.
Okay.
But every speck of gravel that's used on that island has to be barged out there. And so Bill has the island transporter,
Right,
you know,
so it's
pretty much scheduled almost every 2 weeks.
So if we say, yes, Luther, we're going to work with you, you would send a contract, or how would we do that?
If with a plan, I can know how much I can give you a proposed budget.
Yeah.
And then after I review that and do that, then I can give you an idea what that deposit might be.
Okay. And we won't have a plan. I haven't started designing anything because I don't believe in going ahead. Like, if someone tells me it's $800 a square foot, that's a different house than $350 a square foot, right? I'm gonna have to do different things.
Yeah.
So I haven't done anything. Right. So now I'm getting ready to pick up my pen.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's why I was so anxious to meet you and
Yeah.
kind of move this to the next step. Because for me, I want to get this one going through the design process.
Yes.
And so once we have this range to start working with, a square foot range, then I can go back to, Ed and Cynthia and say, all right, that's about this size house.